Hi guys, what's going on? And welcome back to another episode of Total War Arena. And today we're going to be sort of having a bit of a look, a bit of a guide almost, looking at archers, thinking about them sort of strategically and some of the options you have when you're fighting in battle, while sort of having a bit of an analysis of this replay. So yeah, we are in the Battle of Thermopylae, I believe this map is. And yeah, we've got the tier 7 Scythian archers. First things first, let's get started, but I picked a bit of a bad starting spot really between two cavalry. I've got no friendly support around me. Not a particularly good thing to be doing when you're archers, because if you get caught out by enemy cavalry or anything else that's quicker than you, you're going to be in trouble very quickly. So first thing I do is I start to rush over to these barbarian infantry, who can at least provide me a bit of protection as we sort of head into the forest. Which they do a good job of. You always want to be trying to stay with friendly infantry, or at least some sort of support. And that doesn't really include cavalry, because they're not really there and around to protect you when something else turns up. They'll soon rush off and you'll be left standing in the middle of a field all by yourself. So as we move into the forest, we get some sights on these enemy war dogs who are chasing off the tier 6 barbarian cavalry on our team. So we just about get into range, and I just start to throw a couple of shots at these war dogs. Nothing particularly accurate, it just seems to be sort of going all over the place. We caught a smidging of friendly fire, but Brian and Nigel hit the dogs. I use focus fire just to go for a bit of a speculative shot, and we get a few hits on some of the war dogs as they're pulling back out of the combat, but not really a lot. Just gives us a couple of 100 points as we move up. Our allies then do a good job of capturing the central point, which gives us visibility over all this forest. And rather disappointingly, there's not a lot there, because from my point of view, having the high ground here, and if there's some nice enemies in the valley below in this forest, that would be perfect for me just to rain down shots into and arrows without really fearing reprisals back, because they won't be able to see me because we've got all the observation. But nothing there, so nothing I can do. But as we push on, we catch eye on these war dogs, and our barbarian infantry are pushing into them, or certainly pressuring them. And as they hesitate, we start to get some shots into them, and with them being barbarians and having a really low missile block chance, we can get a lot of damage against them pretty easily. Look at that, sort of 8,000, 7,000, 7,000, so we're doing over 20,000 damage to those guys. The amount of points we've got already is getting shots into them. Then we do basically the same thing as these war dogs pull out. I'm always targeting the furthest unit to try and avoid friendly fire. Unfortunately, I didn't quite notice these cavalry in time. I was a bit slow there, and we do rack up a little bit of friendly fire against these guys, which wasn't so good. And that's why I cease fire and begin to push back in. But then their dog handlers come back for some reason, start to engage the barbarian infantry. But as you see here, some of these handlers are actually really quite far back from our allies. So by targeting this back unit here, I can get shots in them without really causing any friendly fire. You can see I'm causing a couple of thousand damage to the enemy, but so far no friendly fire damage. However, as they start to get closer to our allies, you can see friendly fire starts to creep in a little bit, and hopefully, if I'm following my own policy, I should start to cease fire shortly and just switch to focus fire, which is what I'm doing. You can see the focus fire, much more accurate, deals a good amount of damage without causing too much friendly fire damage. But since it looks like our infantry have got this one in the bag now, and the enemy are stuck on scorched earth, then there's no point in me shooting really too much into the back of this, because I'm not going to be doing a lot, unless I wanted to just clip the back of them. But, I'd want to be trying to avoid causing any friendly fire. Probably wasn't worth doing that shot. It's just getting a little bit greedy there by me. So in a position like that where your allies are clearly going to be winning, you don't need to be causing friendly fire unnecessarily. So as we push up to the end of the forest, this is kind of one of the critical points. I'm just going to pause here actually. I know it breaks the flow of the replay up, but we kind of want to analyse what the situation is and what my choices are. So the bulk of our forces are sort of scattered through this forest. We've got some guys here on the observation. And it's worth bearing in mind this is the only observation tower on this map, so that means we have observation over this central forest, but the enemy has no observations into this forest. So none of these units, these heavy tier 7 Roman legionaries here, can be seen. The barbarians here and the hand handlers and myself should all be hidden because I'm far enough away from the forest edge. These couple of Romans here will be getting visibility as they push out, and obviously these hand handlers will be providing a little bit of visibility, although they're wavering, so that gives them an 80% reduction to view range, so they won't see a lot other than these enemies around them. But in front of us, you can see we have what can only be described as a small sort of armada of enemy artillery, enemy slingers, and all sort of fenced in there's just this massive array of stakes in this sort of huge defensive position on this rock face. And they're defended by high tier Roman infantry, some sort of other Roman infantry. It's going to be pretty hard to root these guys out. And not to mention, it's not only this that is a threat to us, but we also have some sort of crossfire from another 2 units of enemy artillery down there, more heavy infantry, archers, and spearmen. So they've sort of adopted a really strongly defensive position. And that kind of calls into question what's the best thing to do. Obviously, we can't be seen in this forest. This just offers a position of safety. But if we look at our own team layout, we can see we only have 2 units of artillery, and I am the only ranged unit on our team. So really, we're significantly at the range disadvantage. As you can see, the battle is already turning against us. And if we were to stay put, then we would almost certainly lose, because they have access to all the artillery, and as they start to get individual spots, they'll just rain down stones, and slingers will start to throw longer range shots at you. Really, when you're in this situation, when the bulk of your units are set in melee and cavalry, then you have no choice to be on the offensive. These guys can afford to defend because they have all the ranged units, and we cannot. Which is kind of why I am then, in this position, forced to come out of the forest. I was sort of analysing the battle, deciding what I wanted to do, if I wanted to push out or not, and decided really I have no choice. So following that sort of conclusion, I thought, well, the best thing I can do, these slingers are going to be my biggest threat if they notice me, which they will do shortly. So there we go, they'll notice me. So I want to try and get up to this cliff face, both to get in range of these slingers, and hopefully if I can get close enough to this, I'll be out of range of this enemy artillery, which I won't be able to throw down, and the slingers will have a hard time hitting me as well. So the slingers pull back to try and get out of range of me, and we have friendly elephants coming in. So I start to get some shots into the slingers at range, which worked well. But I make my first mistake in I forget to activate hunt on one of these artillery or enemy infantry units, so I can sort of keep place of where the enemies are, because we can't get very good visibility over this cliff edge. And I forget to do that, which is kind of a mistake, which is why now we can't see this artillery. If I'd used my hunt ability, we would now be able to stick in place and we'll be able to see exactly where it is. But anyway, these slingers are retreating out of range, and the only thing we've got visibility on is these enemy artillery crew on the edge. Obviously, absolutely devastate them with the amount of damage we do. They are completely unarmoured, unshielded units, so they cut down pretty easily for us. We cause nuke damage on them because we do so much damage at once, and they rout basically straight away. But we get clobbered by a massive unit, massive amount of damage from this enemy artillery which is on the side of us, these tier 5s. So the best thing I can do is to try and push myself around this cliff face. You can see they're positioned over here. If I can get around to this side of the cliff face, then I should be able to protect myself from damage. I get a bit greedy and stop to shoot, which is what I shouldn't have done. I get my few more shots out and then think, well, I better actually start to think about getting around this cliff face and push on around just as the last couple of shots come in, and I just managed to get round to safety. And now I can't be hit by that enemy artillery. I can just focus on killing off what remains of this health. So yeah, the enemy Romans are trying to protect their artillery crew here with their testudo formation, and while it works a little bit, it doesn't really work very well for them in this case. And as you can see, we get the nuke damage modifier on them, and actually causes a quite significant morale drop, and they actually just rout. So that's one of the benefits of killing the artillery crews in sort of 1 or 2 volleys, in the sense that you get that nuke damage modifier, and that causes them to rout. These guys over here, which have just got a little bit of health remaining, I won't be able to get a nuke damage modifier on anymore because they're already too damaged. So I see these enemy slingers got caught up by some of our cavalry, but our cavalry ended up routing, so I start to get some shots into these slingers again, because these are still one of the main threats that are facing me. These slingers easily outrange me, and they have a really high damage amount. They just have a low weapon penetration. But because I don't have that much armour, although at tier 7 it's actually starting to build up a little bit, I want to try and get rid of those slingers really early on. So, but they drive out of range, and I'm not in a mood to sort of chase up this hill, not when there's still significant amounts of enemy infantry up here. So instead, I turn and start to finish off these artillery crews. Again, the Romans trying to protect them, which helps for a little bit, but sooner or later, any second now, one of my arrows finds its way through the Roman shields, and yeah, kills the last man on the artillery, and that is all the enemy artillery on this hill taken out, and that racks us up a massive amount of points. You know, we've killed off 1 or 2 players worth of enemy artillery, and removed a significant portion of the enemy force. Although we are still losing the battle just. I get a couple of shots into these pikemen who were just stood on the top of the hill, but then they realise I was shooting them into fight in the shade, which gives them massive increase to missile block chance. So I give up, no point continuing to shoot them, it'll take me ages to kill them. So I'm just now looking for targets. There's lots of enemies around us, but lots of them are in testudo, so it's just looking for opportunities to shoot people when they're in a vulnerable position, like these Romans, or these foot companions. While they have fight in the shade activated, they turn their back on me, which means their shields are facing away, and I can start to land arrows in them without fear of without being able to do a large amount of damage to them, which is exactly what I wanted. But now they've turned to face me again. You see, we've got fight in the shade activated, and you can see we do basically no damage. 127 is nothing for the game. So then the situation continues to get tough. What do I want to be doing now? It's still a very close battle. It's really all to play for, and we're looking at what are the main threats facing our forces at the moment. And I decided it's probably this artillery down here. Most of our forces are engaging the enemy infantry. It's not that easy for me to get shots on any of these infantry without causing significant amounts of friendly fire. And this artillery is continually shooting, and you can see it's lobbing stones in against their infantry units, causing quite a lot of damage. I don't know if you can see how much they're racking up quite a good amount of aggression points continually, this player. So I want to get in and kill them, basically, which is why I am advancing down this way as quickly as I can. If I can get into range, I should be able to kill these artillery crews pretty quickly. I hesitate slightly here because our friendly cavalry then slams into these artillery crews, which gets them to rout, and I, at this point, look away thinking, well, that's them dealt with, I don't need to worry about that anymore. So I turn my attention to, we get presented with a nice rear of these tier 7 legionaries. I actually activate barrage, and while we cause a small amount of friendly fire, you can see as a proportion it's only, you know, like 1/10 of the amount of damage we do to these enemy Romans. And we just completely eviscerate these tier 7 legionaries. You kill off so many of them. And then we get presented with the same opportunity over here, and this is why archers can be really powerful. While yes, facing Romans who are in Testudo will not do a lot of damage. But when you face them and they're not in Testudo, if you get a rear shot on them, something like that, you'll suddenly start to do pretty vast amounts of damage. Then it all changes and I start getting shot at, which I wasn't expecting, but I had forgotten that the enemy did have some archers down here, but we don't have visibility on them. So I can't get any shots on them, so I'm suddenly have to go into a sort of a dodge pattern to try and avoid their fire and pull range on them, at least until we get visibility. So we start to get a bit of visibility on them, so I start to get my sort of first range of shots in. But because they stopped after I fired, my archers were trying to lead a shot against them when they weren't moving. So things were, I was getting a bit annoyed with these, and they're starting to turn fire on me. So I used a focus fire to get the damage in there. But then I hadn't noticed that this enemy artillery hadn't actually been taken out by our cavalry. Some of the crew must have survived and have remanned the artillery. So we're now being hit by the artillery and the archers. As you can see, we're starting to take quite a lot of damage to our units. I stopped to get a volley into these enemy archers, which we do a good amount of damage in, but then I'm trying to pull back to put this big rock here between me and the enemy artillery, with the intention of them flanking round, because you can see as the terrain drops away, and this rock here means this enemy artillery up here shouldn't be able to shoot in this part of the map, so I'm trying to use the terrain to shelter my units from the enemy artillery, basically, which generally works pretty well, although it doesn't shelter me from these enemy archers because they've got a much more arcing fire. Again, I forget to probably use my hunt, which means I don't get such good visibility on these enemy archers. But we get a few more barrages in, and we're starting to reduce their health now, knock out some of the units. We're starting to knock down their firepower enough that they're no longer a massive threat to me. And even though there's some of them still alive, getting shots into me, they're not quite doing the damage that they were at one point. So at this point, I'm trying to push up this hill here, just to get enough visibility on these enemy catapults that I can drop a hunt on them. Which hopefully I do. You see the hunt activates, they get hunt activated. It takes me 48 seconds. Full visibility on that artillery unit now. My plan was I can then drop back down this hill and shoot these artillery units to my heart's content. I know a hound handler had got in there. I was tempted to not fire, but my feeling was that the artillery crew might not get killed and this guy might rout, and we actually were able to kill the artillery crew without even getting a single hit on that guy, so it actually didn't pan out too badly for us. These legionaries are the legionaries that came with the artillery crew, so they don't have access to any charge, any testudo, because they're Caesar Romans, because they're not really a fighting infantry, they're just a catapult protection crew. So I can pretty shoot them with impunity without worrying about them having a heavy infantry charge into me, or testudo to block my missile damage or anything like that. So they're not too much of a threat to me. But there's blooming barbarian archers are still alive and shooting me. So I have to worry about them. Obviously we're racking up a nice amount of score now. It's trying to keep our archers in play for the whole battle is also one of the things that I'm trying to do. You know, we're continually racking up damage even as these Romans run away. I know I'm taking a little bit of fire from these barbarian archers. The amount of damage I'm getting on these Romans is kind of exceeds the amount of damage these guys are doing to me quite significantly. But finally I decide the time is right just to finish these guys off. And we pretty much do. I think the final volley should do it. Oh, how did he escape that? One more, and that is... There we go. Put a massive barrage in, and that is Boudica dead and the barbarian archers eliminated. And you can see the battle is now tipped significantly in our favour, and we've basically just got to finish off what remains. And although it's worth noting that while the battle's in our favour, a good amount of our remaining points are in artillery crews over here, who can't really apply anything, although they do have a unit of legionaries with them. And myself and the archers, who obviously have no hand-to-hand combat ability. In terms of actually melee units, this is really all that's left to us. The enemy actually have more. So it sort of comes down to me a little bit to sort of soften them up before we can really win this. I'm not worried because the spears are, by clicking on them I can see the commander the spears are, and we can see that they're Leonidas spearmen, so they're never going to be able to catch me. My units will be quicker than them, so I've not really got to worry about them catching up with me. And obviously the armoured legionaries are chronically slow, so it's nothing to worry about. But they do have a fight in the shade ability, which means when I'm shooting them frontally I don't really get that much damage in. So ultimately I'm just trying to sort of work my way further closer, getting a little bit of damage in them, trying to work closer and switching between targets. As our melee units work their way around, these units have to keep changing their facing to face off against my allies. And whenever they change their facing, it provides me with an opportunity to get some barrage rounds in. See, like into these pikemen here, you know, again they go into fight in the shade to try and protect themselves, which helps them a little bit. So I turn my focus to change onto the armoured legionaries, because well, these armoured legionaries can't actually protect themselves because these are the artillery protection crew. So trying to keep firing them. You see, as those cavalry came in, these hoplites changed direction to turn to face that cavalry, and that would have been an opportunity there for me to get some shots in on those legionaries. Kind of like these pikemen come up to this gap here to try and block it off so that the cavalry can't get in, was their thinking. But this presented me with an opportunity because shortly, hopefully once I finish off these legionaries over here, you'll see I then advance forwards. He says, hopefully, if we kill these legionaries, I advance forward because these guys have now got their backs to me, not thinking that I'm going to shoot them. We can get a volley into the back, and look at that. Their fight in the shade no longer applies, and the unit is just completely eliminated. These guys are now basically on their own against me, and while I don't do a lot of damage from the front, sooner or later they're going to have to make a move in one direction or the other. Which they do. I think they actually come from me if I remember correctly, and then I split up and I can kill them off. Yes, they try and make their move. They start to moving towards me. I accidentally click to move towards them, but I'm not worried because I've got my dash ability, which will allow me to get away from these guys. So I start to pull back because I know I can outrun them. Friendly cavalry goes into the back of them, punches a hole in them slightly. I think they stop in the gap, turn around, and as soon as they turn around, boom, we can do full damage to them because their fight in the shade no longer applies because their shields are facing forwards, not backwards. And we can start to rack up a decent amount of damage again, which we do. Our allies just get out of the way initially, allow us to get some shots in, which I do, and then as our allies push in, I cease fire because I don't want to be causing friendly fire, obviously. And our allies nicely sandwich them in the middle. Don't know if they're going to get enough damage to rout. Yeah, minus 38 morale, and bop, bop, bop. And that is the game over, and victory to us. So yes, that was a pretty idyllic game with the archers. Obviously, we got top player, we were able to get a lot of damage in there. A lot of our damage we picked up from those artillery crews, so probably didn't necessarily slaughter huge and vast amounts of enemy infantry. Killing off those artillery crews was kind of pretty important to us because they were the ones that were applying continual damage against us. And by being able to take them out before the game goes on too long, that stopped them continuing to apply that damage. And I think our friendly infantry would have had kind of a hard job fighting their way through those stakes to actually get into the artillery crews, because you saw how long after I'd eliminated those artillery crews, our infantry was still fighting in that area. So those artilleries would have been around a lot longer if we hadn't taken them out with our archers. So I think it's kind of just like that, trying to pick your targets, trying to kick with friendly infantry to keep yourselves alive, and trying to avoid causing too much friendly fire. That's really the key to being an archer player. Trying to keep your troops in the game and firing sort of continually throughout the length of the game allows you to build up those really good damage values. So hopefully you found this video slightly useful. Any questions about archers or any comments on the video, anything like that, let me know in the comment section down below. Please give the video a like, it really helps the channel out. Subscribe to the channel for lots more Total War Arena content, and thanks guys, I shall see you all on the next video.